Hello, I'm going to talk about Criterion 5, Resource Planning and Institutional Effectiveness. We had our meeting today at noon, and this is a brief recap of that. Criterion 5 talks about primarily institutional resources and structures and processes. We want those in place to help guide the mission of the institution. So starting with core component 5A, this talks about the institution's resource base supports its current educational programs and its plans for maintaining and strengthening their quality in the future. So we do feel like we have adequate resources to fulfill the mission of the college. And we look at several things. Primarily, we're looking at the strategic planning process and the budgeting process. Just to talk a little bit about the financial status of the institution, we did have three different reduction in force between 2015 and 2016. We also have had cut in state appropriations. We talk about in the assurance argument between FY14 to FY17, we had a decrease of 18.5% or over $1 million decrease in state appropriations. This year, our budget is somewhat flat. We did get an increase for concurrent enrollment. State Regents was not completely funding concurrent enrollment for the seniors, and now we were at 27% reimbursement and we're up to 87%, so still not quite to 100%. As far as our revenue sources at the college, we use state appropriations, tuition, and fees is our way to generate income. Most of this information can be found on the website. We have data in our college plan related to our budget. We also have any external audits also placed on the website. Going on to the second part of core component 5A, we talk about the various goals that are incorporated as part of the mission statement. And so we really want to look at our strategic planning goals. There are 3 of those. The first is to increase student success. The second is to provide new and expanded opportunities for professional and organizational growth, and then organizational development. And third is to create a culture of inquiry, innovation, and action through quality assessment. So those are our 3 major strategic planning goals, and everything else kind of falls underneath that. We have presidential priorities that are a little bit more specific, but they feed into those goals, which feed back into the mission. We have a very stringent process for our budgeting and monitoring of expenses. For example, before you can purchase money or travel, you have to do a request, either a travel request or a purchase order, and then it has to go through a series of signatures to get approval before money is spent. One example of the process of spending money and how it goes through the strategic planning process is the math department. Through their student assessment, they determined that students were not doing well in some of their math courses. They felt it could be related to the calculators. They were not using the same calculators as they use for an example, which is the emulator. And so they requested to purchase new calculators. That was put in their operational action plan. It was presented to the strategic planning committee, and then it was approved. Those got purchased, and the students are using those now, and they've already seen increases on testing. So that's a great example of what they, of how the strategic planning process and the budgeting process tie together and related to assessment. Going on to core component 5B, the institution's governance and administrative structures promote effective leadership. And so we're really talking about our Board of Regents. It is a 7-member board. The board members are on the board for 7 years unless they get an extension. Most of the policies and procedures that oversee the college that are related to employees are found in the employee handbook. We also have shared governance at the college. And we have faculty, staff, and student senate. And these members are able to have a bigger voice in the college, and they're on committee as well to help be able to give their input as far as what processes take place. We're going on to Criterion 5, core component 5C. This talks about a systematic and integrated planning system. And this really falls back to the strategic planning process. We have a planning cycle that is in the college plan. It's very ongoing, the process. We have the mission that kind of helps guide us in those strategic planning goals, and then we go on to look at assessment data and determine what needs there are, and then we have initiatives, and then it goes through the budgeting cycle, and it's kind of a loop, continuous loop, very similar to our assessment cycle that is kind of a continuous loop. We also have done different things with our external constituents. We've done SWOT analysis, which is a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats assessment. That was last sent out at fall of 2017. We're meeting with the Strategic Planning Advisory Board next week to have them review our mission statement and talk a little bit about our HLC review as well as our strategic planning process. Let's see, going on to the second part of 5C, just to let you know, it talks about the demographic shifts and emerging factors that we need to anticipate. We do have a declining population, which is a shift in our demographics. We have also increased in Hispanic population. We've increased from 11% in fall of 2012 to 19.5% in fall of 2016. We also have an increase in concurrent enrollment this year. Also, our makeup of our students is primarily part-time. A larger percent of our students are part-time and a larger percent are female. Our military population is about 7%. Also, I just wanted to let you know our strategic plan is right now active from 2018 to 2022. Going on to core component 5D. It talks about the institution works systematically to improve its performances. We have several different types of evaluations that we do. Faculty have annual evaluations. Students do evaluations of courses and faculty. We also have our student assessment or assessment of student learning outcomes or course outcomes and program outcomes. We also have a program review. And so we have several different evaluation processes in place that help us gather data so we can systematically improve it. So if we find an issue in some of that area, then that would go back into the people in the departments would write an operational action plan and how they want to deal with that issue. And then if it needs funding, it would go through the strategic planning process and request funds and through the budget. And then it would be, they'd get money awarded, and then they would evaluate those operational action plans the next year. So it's definitely a cycle that we have. So again, Criterion 5 talks a lot about resources and that systematic approach, that we have a process in place to evaluate the things that we initiate. So I have a few focus questions, and these are also listed in the PowerPoint that I sent out. The first would be, tell me about your budget process. So this might be a question that a reviewer might ask, and when we talked about it in our meeting today, people discussed basically the transparency, how the budget was tied back to those strategic goals, and then it went through the strategic planning process. They really go together. The next question is, what is the process for monitoring expenses? As we mentioned, there's quite a bit of oversight before you can even purchase something. Once something is purchased, we have very stringent guidelines as far as monitoring those expenses. We do tag things that are over $500 so we can track those, computers and things like that. If you for some reason spend more that's in your allotted budget, we have to do a budget revision that goes from your supervisor, and then changes would be made in your budget. So we try to have several things that as far as oversight, so that doesn't happen. If you have a question about a specific budget, who do you go to? In the meeting today, people said we go to Heather. So a lot of people go to Heather Hood and ask her, since she's our controller. But you can also go to your department supervisor. It depends where you are, what level, and who you would go to. But we've tried to be very transparent. People have copies of the budget, so it shouldn't not be a secret about what's going on. Tell me about your role in strategic plan. We feel like everybody has a role, not just the supervisors, but everybody has input into things they may need, things that can be done. Different people can be tasked to be the person that's over a certain initiative. It does not have to be a director. It depends who requested funding or a specific initiative. Going on, what is the biggest resource challenge at Western? We mentioned today in our group that we thought it was students. Our enrollment is down, and so we cannot generate funds through tuition or fees with a lower population. And that kind of bleeds on to, we feel like we need to increase our online offerings so we can hopefully target students that are in our 5-county area, but students that are outside the 5-county area because of the declining population that we have here. How is assessment of student learning linked to the budgeting? We've kind of talked to this quite a bit already, but if you see something that is not working, is when you collect your assessment data, then you can bring that up and determine if something needs to be done. You can write an operational action plan, and that may or may not take budgeting money. If it does, then that goes through the strategic planning process. You present your information, and then it goes through to determine if it's purchased. There's a rubric that the strategic planning committee would vote on things to determine if that would be able to be purchased. How does the Board of Regents provide oversight to Western's financial and academic policies and practices? All those policies are brought to the board. If they're in the employee handbook, those are voted on there. Every board meeting, they get a financial update. Also, we bring things of larger purchases over $15,000 have to go to the board for approval. So they do have quite a big area of oversight over the college. How does administration, faculty, staff work together, work collaboratively? We talked about this in our group. There's several different ways. One of them talked about faculty advisors contacting admissions and working together during advisement and high enrollment times. We also work collaboratively through the strategic planning process. We feel like we are very transparent and try to be open with all staff and faculty. So as I mentioned, Criterion 5 really talks a lot about resources and planning. So be familiar with the strategic planning process. You can find that in the college plan, which is on our website under institutional information. When you click on the college plan, there's links on the left that you can go down and pick the strategic plan and review that. So next week we have meetings on Tuesday the 25th for all faculty, and staff is on Thursday the 27th. So we really want everybody to be here next week at those meetings. Our visit will be quickly approaching. I will be sending out an agenda very soon, so you'll know when to sign up and when to come for meetings. But we really want everybody to be available for HLC when they're here October 1st and 2nd. Thank you very much.